Hello, welcome to the ranch. Today I'd like to talk about rye. And you might be thinking, rye, that's a big ag crop. That doesn't apply to my little garden. But I have a different look on that. You know, we're not talking about growing and making bread from your garden, but rye can be a valuable helper. Nature has a way, if you don't plant something, then nature will. And you just will be in control of that. And rye can be a valuable helper even in a small space. Most small gardens aren't limited by space, soil, or even the timing. For most of history, the soil around the home was poor. Short seasons, periods where nothing productive would grow. Rye kept showing up in those places. Other plants, they couldn't grow. Rye would show up in narrow places, little strips of land where other things wouldn't grow. You didn't usually dedicate your best soil to rye. You dedicated your worst. It wasn't grown to maximize harvest. It was grown to keep your systems in place. When gardens became focused on mostly vegetables, well, rye lost its place. But the problems it solved, they haven't went away. Small gardens, they still deal with limited space, seasons where there's nothing growing, uneven soil, and dead times of year. Rye was built in those constraints. It wasn't so much valuable for what you got for it, but it was what it changed. Rye sends its roots deeper than most plants, even on hard, compacted soils. And it brings those nutrients back up to the surface, and it breaks up that heavy soil. And they do so when nothing else is growing. You don't feel it, see it in the harvest, but you see it in the change it brings. In some cases, it had small practical uses, such as extra nutrients for some hens, not their primary diet, but a little something extra, especially when times were hard. Once it gets up a ways, you can cut it down and let it lay as a mulch. It'll hold and protect the soil, and eventually it breaks down, putting those nutrients that it pulled from way below and putting them back near the surface, usable to your more favored plants. Historically, rye was used for simple thatching, not because it was best, because it's what you had. Rye occupies that time gardeners leave empty. Winter, early spring, periods where the soil is exposed and it's leaching nutrients. Nothing productive is happening except loss of your nutrients. Instead of competing with your vegetable, it works alongside your vegetables. It protects soils, builds organic matter, and keeps your system from sliding backwards while the garden is off. That's why rye fit into small places for so long. It didn't need ideal conditions, it just needed a job. Because rye works outside of the main growing season, tends to fit in places most gardeners don't think of much. Historically, it showed up along the hedges, places where vegetables struggled, but it built those soils as it did so. It fills your gaps in your rotation. When a bed's finished for a year, keeps the soil occupied instead of leaving it exposed. In small gardens, these places are common. Awkward corners, places between plantings, soil too unproductive to waste a lot of time on. Rye can do the work for you. Rye doesn't need perfect places. It just needs places to exist. It works in the margins, in time, space, and soil that would otherwise go unused. Not as a centerpiece, but an unglamorous helper that most plants just aren't made to do. Rye is not for every space in your garden, but it can be a super valuable helper. It's used where something's needed to hold together the system. Even if you never grow rye, it's still worth understanding why it kept showing up. Rye is a reminder that gardens weren't always built in ideal conditions. They were built around limits. Rye wasn't used because it's so impressive. It was chosen because it kept things from falling apart. Not as a plant to show off, but an unglamorous helper. Small gardens still deal with those kind of limits, and tools for those limits seem to outlast everything else. Thank you much for watching. Check back in on me from time to time. I've always got something new going on.